Could you say definitively that you will allow the international press in without the IDF?
I didn't say without the IDF, but we can have more numbers than you can see. I mean, it's so small. You can't really, it's not like
I've been there with the IDF. No. It is small, but it is the more important thing is to allow the press in independently. And if you really want to change the perception of Gaza, then it is not. There's a ceasefire now in place.
Yeah, but it's still a war zone. We just had
It's hard for me not to think that you have something that you want to hide when you won't let the press in.
It's that last part where she pushed him. Benjamin Netanyahu had his feet held to the fire by the Economist's editor-in-chief, Zanny Minton Beddoes. She confronted him about Israel refusing to allow journalists access to Gaza without an IDF escort. Before we hear more excuses from Netanyahu, Cenk, give us your initial take here.
The Israeli government kills more journalists than all other regimes and terrorist groups in the world combined. There's a reason why they murder so many journalists, because they don't want to see the country and the world to see the horrors of what they have done in Gaza, which is an unmitigated, disgusting slaughterhouse and a complete genocide. And that is agreed by the entire world. But Netanyahu is desperate to keep out all journalists. And if there's Palestinian journalists, he'll just kill them, including American journalists like Shireen Abu Akleh. And he knows the American press and the American government will be his dogs, and they will say, oh no, Israel is the best democracy in the Middle East, as he murders journalist after journalist after journalist and does not let others in, because they are not a democracy. They're a dictatorship in Gaza and the West Bank, and they have been an absolutely brutal dictatorship, occupying in a deeply disgusting racist way another group of people and keeping them in open air camps. So we'll give you the facts on how many journalists they have murdered now, and understand, of course, that she's right. The only reason why they're not letting more independent journalists in is because then they'd have to kill them to make sure that the truth doesn't get out and only Israeli propaganda gets out. And that's what we've been living with our whole lives.
Yeah, the reporter is correct. As you said, journalists are still barred from going into Gaza to evaluate the situation independently, meaning without the presence of the IDF. And only a few foreign reporters have been allowed into the Strip while embedded with IDF troops. Netanyahu's government is fighting to keep it that way. The Times of Israel reported just a week ago that Israel's government has told the Supreme Court that a ban on international media access in Gaza should remain in place due to security risks in the enclave, according to a court submission. The deputy editor, Edward Carr, also pressed Netanyahu on allowing the press into Gaza. And while answering the question, Bibi admitted that journalists had been killed.
Why don't you allow international journalists into Gaza?
I think we do, but we could do more, and we probably should.
But not without being with the IDF.
Yeah, well, that's not an uncommon practice, but I can tell you one thing. First of all, we don't want any journalists killed, and some have been tragically killed because there's crossfire. It's dangerous. We just had this now, today. We had rocket fire. A few days ago, we had sniper fire. That's yesterday, actually. I wouldn't be so cavalier about it. And the last thing I want to see is any of you or anyone else.
There have been a huge number of journalists killed in Gaza. So I don't think it's very easy for you to say that you are not concerned about people's lives.
Well, of course I am, because we didn't target them. Zanny, we didn't target them. We don't kill journalists, and we don't jail them either, and we certainly don't execute them, as Hamas is doing.
With a straight face.
Yeah. Sharon, can I just jump in on that?
Yeah.
That was a bold-faced lie. Israel executes journalists on a regular basis. So we're gonna give you the numbers in a second. I'm gonna let Sharon go, but Shireen Abu Akleh was shot and killed by a sniper. She's one of the most famous journalists in the Middle East. She was an American, and New York Times, CNN, American government, all had to acknowledge, yeah, that was an assassination. Israel murdered her. And by the way, our government asked for no consequences for an American journalist being murdered by the state of Israel, because we're not allowed to object to our overlords. They run us, so we can't say, hey, sorry, but like the Saudis, that's another ostensible ally of America, they murdered a journalist. He wasn't a US citizen, but he worked for the Washington Post, and what they did to him was horrific, Khashoggi. They killed him, assassinated him, dismembered him, etc. In this case, Same exact thing. There's no dismemberment, but they shoot her in the neck and murder her. And everyone acknowledges that they murdered her, except no controversy, no outrage. The American government grovels to Israel and goes, oh, please murder more of our journalists. We're so sorry we ever brought it up. Has the murderer been arrested? Has America asked for the Israeli assassin who murdered an American journalist to be arrested? Absolutely not, because we're their client state. Even though we give them $300 billion, we work for them. And we're not allowed to criticize the beloved Israeli government. Our politicians are the most corrupt, disgusting people. They work for a foreign government. They never protect us. But it's not just that one American journalist. They've killed hundreds of journalists. And yes, from hundreds of yards away, usually a chest or a headshot, because they're assassins, they're terrorists, and they're definitely targeting the journalists on purpose. More numbers, Sharon.
So here's the reality, Cenk, of what's happened in Gaza since the war began. Nasser Abu Bakr, chairman of the Palestinian Journalist Syndicate, reported that more than 255 journalists were killed in Gaza, representing 18% of the overall number in the Strip. More than 500 wounded. Israel arrested over 200 others, he said they didn't arrest, who were subjected to extreme torture in prison. Additionally, relatives of journalists also were killed or targeted. Gaza has become the deadliest place for journalists ever. The Committee to Protect Journalists released a report last year. It found more journalists were killed in 2024 than in any other year in the past 3 decades. Nearly 70% were killed by Israel. 2024, the deadliest year. So I guess Netanyahu is correct when he says Gaza isn't a safe place for reporters. Cenk, he's just lying about who's carrying out the most violence against them. Do you think Israel will allow journalists to go into Gaza independently at any point? Will they be forced to?
Well, they're not forced to do anything. They're mighty Israel. They will force the world to do whatever they want. It will not go in other direction. Now, if you say, hey, Cenk, that sounds hyperbolic, and golly gee, are you targeting poor, tiny little victim Israel in an unfair way? Well, let's see what's fair and unfair. I mean, look at that Committee to Protect Journalists number. They lapped the field. They killed more journalists than all other countries and terrorist organizations combined, and it wasn't close. Israel killed 70% of the journalists that were killed in 2024, everyone else combined only killed 30%. And then they broke a record because Israel was slaughtering journalists at such a fever pitch. No one has ever seen journalists being murdered at this rate. Now, those are facts. Did you see that on cable news? No, you can't see it on cable news because cable news works for Israel. So if you said this on cable news, you'd probably be fired. And you'd say, well, but it's true. And your editors would say, yes, it's true, but facts have a well-known anti-Israel bias. So we're gonna say that you hate Jews and we're gonna ruin your life. And you're never allowed to work in news again because you actually report the news. So Israel doesn't just assassinate and literally kill journalists in Gaza. They also kill journalism across the West, because anyone who correctly, factually objects to Israel will be labeled an anti-Semite by some Israel First executive here in America or in Britain, and they will fire you. And then the rest of the press will join in and call you an anti-Semite and try to ruin your life on behalf of Israel, because Israel despises journalism. Now, if Americans and the West found out what Israel was actually doing, including slaughtering journalists, well, they wouldn't support them because they're not a liberal democracy. They're not anything that they claim to be. They're not a special ally. They're the largest terrorist organization in the world. Terrorists are jealous of how many people Israel has killed and how many journalists Israel has killed. So, no, the #1 enemy of journalists across the world is the government of Israel. So that is super clear. In fact, there's a wonderful filmmaker, Robert Greenwald. He's at Brave New Films, and he did this really short documentary. It's only 41 minutes. Gaza journalists under fire. Please check it out. If you could make it through that 41 minutes and not be as opposed to Israel as I am, well, then I'll say, okay, at least you looked at the facts and at least you looked at what happens on the ground and you say you're okay with it. But I don't think almost anybody can make it out of that movie and not realize what Israel is doing to journalists and to human rights overall. So yeah, if they allow the journalists in, they will be completely surrounded by the IDF. If they go rogue and actually try to give you things that are true about Israel, there's an excellent chance Israel will literally murder them. Because that is what they've done to over 250 journalists already. So that's not an accident. It's because they do not want actual news coming out of Israel. Their only advantage, Sharon, is that they have been able to do overwhelming propaganda on behalf of Israel to keep people from finding out what Israel's up to. I mean, there's comical things in America, like they think, in 1948, 750,000 Palestinians got up and decided to go for a picnic and said, you know what? Let Israel keep all of our homes. Don't worry about it. It's totally fine. We're the bad guys for even objecting to it. No, they were ethnically cleansed out of what is current day Israel. The only reason why you don't all know that is because Israel has been doing nothing but propaganda in the West for the entire time. And if you do something outside of that and you're anywhere near them, they will literally kill you, as they did with Shireen Abu Akleh and 250 journalists. And if you're here in the US, they'll try to get you fired. So that has been their strategy from day one. They will never veer from that strategy, because if you find out about the truth of Israel, you will not support Israel. Every time you ring the bell below, an angel gets his wings. Totally not true, but it does keep you updated on our live shows.